Listen to me, Eddie. You're smarter than this. This isn't you, it's the suit. I've been behind it. I know what it's doing. Let me help you. Before you do something you're going to regret. I gotta get Eddie off. No! Yeah! I have to get loose. I have to stop him. I've been sitting on my tush all day. Time for a little workout. Let's start with some wall crawling. Just a little jump up here, jump, and then jump again. Sure, it breaks the laws of physics, but so do most things I do. Web zipping is great for low buildings like these. These buildings are tall enough to web swing off of pretty easily. I'll go easy on you this time, Herman. I'll only use my webs.
Ow! I'll kill you!
There's one guy who isn't getting back up. 2 down. You okay?
Ah, get away from me, you freak!
It's that kind of quality human interaction that makes it all worthwhile. Oh, I need to get home. Ready, set, go! Oh, man.
What are you supposed to be, anyway? Bub, I am the best at what I do. And what that is ain't pretty at all. See these claws? Unbreakable. You, that not. Bad idea, bub. A mutant can't have
Any of you know where I can save money on my car insurance? Ah! Ready for this? Look at that. Good on, man.
Thanks, Spidey.
Get out of the car before you hurt somebody.
Breaking news from...
Hang on!
Go! Help! Help!
I just need to pick him up and move him to safety. Easy stuff.
Wow.
You're
Thanks, man.
stealing from me. This is my store.
I need to get that TV off that poor guy. He's getting crushed.
Oh, great. Now you're going to steal my stuff.
Well, actually, I was saving your life. I think the words you're looking for were, thank you?
Hurry up before the cops get here.
What? I don't count? Oh, you do know me. I feel all warm and fuzzy now. Maybe I'm worried about nothing. Maybe it's just the worst parking garage attendant ever. There's a woman trapped under that car. Well, that's no good at all.
Help us! Hey! Help! Oh, no!
The people in there will burn alive if I don't get that car out of... Everybody out! No, he's about to fall. I guess there's no such thing as a slow day when you're a big-time superhero. My pinky hurts. How about a guy dressed up like a teddy bear who gives hugs? How about that, huh? Just once. A huggy bear instead of wet cement. Not to worry. This is a job for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
The Zeros! McCormick! The Zeros! McCormick!
I'll just jump up and grab his back.
I will destroy you!
That hole in his back looks like a weak spot.
I hate spiders!
Jumanji! Punching that hole in his back might be a good idea. Get the electricity going. Maybe I can hurt this guy. I'm just gonna lie here for a minute. His back looks safe to land on. Ow. Now's my chance. That's a boo-boo. Are my feet still attached? I don't want to embarrass you, Mr. Rhino. Blue deodorant wouldn't have killed you. What the hell do you think you're doing?
Somebody help me! My friends are never gonna believe this.
Any of you know where I can save money on my car insurance?
Oh, it's on, boy.
My head! It's killing me! What's going on?
Oh no, I'm slipping!
I swear, this whole city would fall apart if it was...
Is there a doctor in the house? Hey, Spider-Man! You there?
I got a spot in the ER waiting.
episodes.
Who do you think you are, Spunky?
I didn't do anything! I don't care what they say. You rock.
Hey, after this, you guys want to go to a movie?
This is a bad...
Bam!
You gotta keep up, boy!
Ooh, getting close.
Feel the love, baby! What do you know? The freak can play keep up. I thought this was a chase, not a freaking walk in the park. Going up. Yeah, not bad. Time to fry, freak. Come on, pick up the pace. Going down. You're gonna die, Brock. Die! Ooh, getting close. That freaking hurt! What do you know? The freak can play keep up. Feel the love, baby! Yeah, not bad. Yeah, not bad. Let's see how you like this. Next stop, top floor. Get it in gear. Ooh, getting close. ground floor. What do you know? The freak can play keep up. Eat it! Oh, you're gonna pay for that. You're not bad. Come on. Come on, pick up the pace. Let's see how you like this. What do you know? The freak can play keep up. You're gonna die, Brock. Die. That freaking hurt. Eat it. You're gonna pay for that. Die! 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 You're gonna die, Brock! Die! You're gonna die, you little... Oh, you're gonna pay for that. Do something about this. You don't stand a chance, Brock. No. You stupid! You're gonna pay for that!
How about stop?
Out of the way!
Thank you so much.
Help me, Spider-Man! It would be so nice just once bump into someone, say hi, and them not try to blow me up. Listen up, Stoppy. I don't know what your deal is, but now I'm talking to myself.
seriously overcompensating for something.
Ooh, pretty lights.
Hang on tight.
Not that tight. All right, you flying pile of repressed. Again with the flying. Let me guess. I'm gonna get near you, and then you're gonna fly away.
You do understand I am the Spider-Man, right?
I'm famous and everything. Hey, be honest. You think this costume makes my butt look fat?
It's the aliens.
Oh no. Hold on, I've got you.
Oh my, thank you.
You get someplace safe, okay? You okay in there? Hey, you hungry?
How about after we're done, we swing by and grab some breakfast or something?
You know, I'm beginning to take this personal. Anything in the battlesuit directions about aiming straight? You missed a spot.
This is the best vacation ever.
Not to worry. This is a job for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
You're the best.
I'm glad you're loose, Brock. I can kick your ass good and proper now. Come on, Brock! Is that all you have?
Operations in progress. There's Brock! It's so fast! Tango crossing baseline Epsilon. Street level! Target low. Target low. Tango crossing baseline Zeta. Tango crossing baseline Iona. There it is! Eye down! Tango low. Tango low. Tango low. Street level. Ground level operations in progress. There's Brock. Brock sighted on rooftop. Target high. Target is sky high. Tango crossing phase line 6. Tango crossing phase line 5. Eye down. Rock sighted at 0 level. Target is on ground floor. There's Brock! Tango on ground! Ground level operations in progress. Target headed high. Tango going high. Sighted at 0. Tango crossing phase line Lambda. Ground through, heads up! Tango crossing phase line Kappa. Contact! Hold on board. He's on your plane. Street level. Target low. Tango on ground. Tango
Oh man, I'm gonna be late again.
Is this for... Yeah, this is exactly what I need in my life right now. Then again, it has been almost 2 hours since I last feared for my life. Please stop doing that! You're getting irritating. You big nudnik. Come on! Those people are gonna be crushed if I don't get them out of there. I don't get it. What's going on? Why is he doing this? Only you can prevent Spider-Man fires. Okay, everyone out of the pool.
Sear the flesh from your bones!
Hot tamale. Thanks, but I had a fireball. Why don't you fall down? Why don't you fall down? Whoa! Hot one. Up high, down low, too slow. This needs...
Die! Die! Die!
Getting irritated. What did the five fingers say to your face? Hey, hit yourself for a second while I go get a glass of water. start hitting you, maybe this will knock you.
Sable's orders. Take Parker with minimal injury.
Bad idea. Get down from there.
Go! Subdue Parker! Use enemy rifles on low wattage. Take Parker alive.
We need to contain this now.
Whatever's in these darts is making me woozy.
Subdue Parker! Take him alive!
I can barely hold on.
Hang on! I'll help you!
First you try to kill me, now you're helping me?
I've been hired to capture you, not to kill innocent people.
Aw, you're crazy with a heart of gold. Hang on, I'll get you down.
Yeah? How are you gonna do that?
Parker, lift the car and help me get these people out. Move quick. I'm moving as fast as I can.
Crazy silver hottie threatened my family. I should let Eddie eat her. He'd be doing me a favor. But then I'd feel guilty about that too, because clearly I don't have enough things to feel guilty about. So now here I am, trying to save the crazy woman. If my life were any more stupid, it would be on network TV. Those darts have made my brain all swimmy.